Hi, it's Chester at Blue Pecan Computer Training, and in this video I'm going to show you how to create a table of contents which is going to list every sheet in your workbook and provide a hyperlink to that sheet. I'm going to show you two methods. One uses some VBA code and the other uses an old Excel 4.0 macro function. Now, of the two methods, I prefer the VBA solution, but you can make your own decision on that. Now, both of these solutions do require you to save your workbook as a macro-enabled workbook. So to do that, you go to File, Save As, and your file type needs to be Excel macro-enabled workbook.xlsm. Okay, so let's look at the first solution where we are going to use some VBA code. So I've created a sheet called TOC using VBA. And the first step is to open up the Visual Basic Editor. And you'll need to be able to see two things in the Visual Basic Editor, both of which should be visible by default. The first thing is the Project Explorer, which shows a list of objects in your workbook. If you can't see that, just go to View, Project Explorer, or use the shortcut key Control R. The other thing you'll need to be able to see is this code window. And if you can't see that, go to View, Code, or use the shortcut F7. Now, in this list of sheets in the Project Explorer, you need to double click on the sheet that you want to display your table of contents in. So for me, that's the table of contents using a VBA sheet. So I double click on that. Then in the code window, you'll see that you have two drop-down lists. At the very top here. In the one that currently says General, choose Worksheet. And then in the second drop-down list, which currently displays Selection change that to Activate. Then you can delete anything below this line in your code window. And between these two lines, you need to paste the code that I've left in the description of this video. Now, this code is pretty much ready to go, apart from two things. So I'm just going to take you through those things that you need to change. The first thing you need to change is in this line here, where it refers to sheet 11. Now, sheet 11 is the sheet that I'm going to store the table of contents in. And I'm referring to it as sheet 11 because that's the code name for the sheet. That never changes. If you change the position of the sheet or you change the name of the sheet, sheet 11 remains unchanged. So you need to change that to the sheet code name that you want to store your table of contents in. And the other place that that is referred to in this code is in this line. And you also need to change that to the sheet code name for the sheet that you want to store your table of contents in. Now, the reason why we chose Worksheet and Activate up here is because that we want this macro to automatically run whenever the table of contents sheet is selected, which will mean that if we add, delete, or rename sheets, this table of contents will remain up to date whenever we visit this particular sheet. Now, I am going to take you through how this macro works. First of all, I declare three variables. These are storage areas within your code. The first variable, SHT, is declared as a worksheet. The second, TOC SHT, is also declared as a worksheet. And then we have row number declared as an integer. Now you'll see how these are used later on in the code. But what I'm doing here is I'm setting TOC sheet, the variable that I've declared up here, to equal sheet 11, the sheet that I want to store the table of contents in. Before I do anything else, I want to clear the entire contents of that sheet, so the sheet is ready for the new table of contents. This section of code here just adds a title to the table of contents in cell A1. It's just going to say table of contents. It's going to be made bold, font size 11, font color white, and background color is a blue. Now the row number variable, I assign the value of 1 to before I start this for each next loop. So this for each next loop is going to loop through every sheet in our workbook, collecting the names of the sheets. Now I don't want to collect the name of the table of contents sheet. You don't normally have the table of contents sheet appearing within a table of contents. So this line of code here says if the code name of the sheet is not sheet 11, then continue with this set of instructions. If the sheet's code name is sheet 11, it's basically going to ignore that sheet. Now, the next line of code increments the row number by 1 on each loop of the for each next loop. And you'll see how that works down here. So let's see what code is executed on each loop. Well, within the table of contents sheet, which don't forget I've declared up here as sheet 11, I want to move down the cells in the first column. And I'm using cells to do this. Now cells is made up of a row number and a column number. I'm always staying in column 1, but I'm using the row number variable to increase the row number by 1 on each loop of the for each next loop, which is why I say row number equals row number plus 1 here. Then I'm going to add a hyperlink to that cell, and I'm using hyperlinks.add, and this has 1, 2, 3, 4 parameters. The first is anchor. So this is where you want the hyperlink to appear, and it's in the cell that we're currently referring to. So cells row number, comma 1. And the address parameter is the workbook that you want to link to. Now we want to link to the current workbook, so I've left that as an empty text string. The subaddress is the place within that workbook that you want to link to. So I want to link to cell A1 in the sheet that the loop is currently looking at. So to create the link, I concatenate an apostrophe with the sheet name, and then concatenate that with another apostrophe, an exclamation mark, and the range address. The next parameter is screen tip. I don't want a screen tip, so I specified an empty text string. And then the last parameter is text to display. That's the text you want to act as the hyperlink, and that'll be the name of the sheet that the loop is currently looking at. Last of all, we just auto-fit the columns in our table of contents sheet, and we're done. So to close the Visual Basic Editor and to see if this works, you can either click up here on this close button or use the shortcut key Alt-Q. Now to run that code, all you need to do is revisit the sheet. So if I click out of the sheet and click back on it, you can see it creates the table of contents for you. Now if I was to add another sheet, say I add Southwest as a sheet, and I'll move that to the end of the workbook. If I now visit my TOC using VBA, you can see that it's automatically added that sheet name to the list. Let's see if the hyperlinks actually work. You can see that they do. Okay, so that was the first method. Let's go on to the second. Now, this method is going to use a function called GET.WORKBOOK, which is an old Excel 4.0 macro. These macros were superseded by VBA in 1993, but still work in Excel today. So GET.WORKBOOK returns information about a workbook. So here's the syntax. It has two arguments, type number and name text. Type number is a number between 1 and 38 that specifies what information is returned. I'll give you some examples of that in a moment. Name text is the name of an open workbook. If omitted, it assumes that you want to refer to the active workbook, which is what we will want to do. So here's some example type numbers. Type 1 returns the names of all the sheets in the workbook as a horizontal array. So that's what we want to do. does not update if a sheet is added or deleted. Now we can get around that, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment. Type number 3, for example, we're not going to use this, but it returns a horizontal array of the names of the currently selected sheets in the workbook. And type 4 is another example, we won't be using this either, returns the number of sheets in the workbook. Okay, so let's see how we can use GET.WORKBOOK. So equals GET.WORKBOOK. Now it's not going to appear in the IntelliSense list, but essentially we only need to use the first argument, and we're going to use 1 as our type number to return all of the sheet names within the workbook. Now if I press enter, it says this function isn't valid. So you can't use these Excel 4.0 macro functions in the normal way that you use functions in Excel. So what you have to do is create a named reference to this formula. And to do that, what I'd do is I'd copy this formula, and I'll press escape to come out of that edit. Then I go to the formulas tab on my ribbon, name manager, and new. Now I'm going to call this sheet names and paste our GET.WORKBOOK formula into the refers to box. If I click on OK and then close, and then I refer to that name, you can see it appears in the IntelliSense list. Press enter. In Excel 365 it will show the complete list of sheet names in a horizontal array. A little bit difficult to see because the columns are not wide enough, but you can see that they are being returned there. If you're on earlier versions of Excel, it won't spill the array of values, but don't worry, this solution is still going to work for you. Now to get the values to appear vertically, we could use the transpose function. And now you can see the list of sheets within our workbook. Again, in Excel 365, it spills the results into surrounding cells. If you're on earlier versions of Excel, it won't do that. But don't worry, the solution will still work for you. Now, the problem with this list as it is it includes the workbook name. And we need to get rid of that workbook name so the results only display the sheet names. And to do that, we can use the replace function. Now the old text is returned by GET.WORKBOOK brackets 1, comma. Now start number, what's the first character that we want to replace? So that'll be the first character in each of these strings. And the number of characters we want to replace, well, we can get that by finding the position of the closed square bracket in each of these text strings. So to find that position, we can use the find function. Find text, a closed square bracket. Within text, well, that's returned by GET.WORKBOOK in brackets 1. Now find does have a third argument, but it's non-mandatory. We don't need to use it in this context. So I just close the bracket, comma. The final argument is new text. What do we want to replace these characters with? An empty text string. And close the bracket. So now what I'm going to do is copy this formula, press escape to come out of the edit, go to my name manager button and edit the sheet names name that we created earlier on. And what I'm going to do is replace the current formula with our replace version formula. Click on this little tick, click on close. You can see now that our sheet names formula only returns the sheet names. Okay, so to create the table of contents, what we're going to do is use the index function. Now the array is sheet names, and in the row number function, we're going to use the row function initially to return the value 1, but as we copy the formula down, we want that number to increment. So row, as you might know, returns the row number of a reference that you supply. So all you need to do to return the number 1 is just to click in a cell in row 1. So I'll say A1. Close the bracket there, and then close the bracket for index. And then if I copy this down, it returns all the sheet names. And how this works is, for example, for GET.WORKBOOK, row is returning 2 in this formula, which means it's returning the second value within the array of values that the sheet names formula is returning, and so on and so forth. So row A3 returns 3, etc., etc. So these are not hyperlinks yet. So to add hyperlinks to these values, we use the hyperlink function. First argument is link location. So to create this link path, what you have to do is you have to start with an open quotation mark, then a hash symbol. So the hash symbol basically means this workbook. Then you need to put an apostrophe in. The apostrophe is necessary if there are any gaps in any of your sheet names, any spaces, and then close the quotation mark. And what I'm going to do is concatenate that with the sheet name. Then at the end of the sheet name, I need to concatenate that with open quotation marks, the closed apostrophe, then an exclamation mark. So you always use an exclamation mark when you refer to a sheet name, and then we'll provide the cell that we want to link to. So we'll say it's always A1, and then close quotation marks, comma. Then we're on to the friendly name. Well, the friendly name is the name that you want to appear in the cell to act as a hyperlink. And what we can do is use this index function, which we know is returning the sheet name. So I'll copy that and paste it into this argument. Close the bracket at the end for hyperlink. We press enter. Copy this down. You can see now that these are hyperlinks and they link to the relevant page in our workbook. Now the next thing to think about is, what if we add new sheets to our workbook? Now, in order for it to pick up new sheets, we will need to copy this formula down further than the number of cells that we're currently using. So I might say, for example, I'm going to have a maximum of 15 sheets. So I'll copy this formula down to row 16. But you can see I get some ref errors here. Now to hide the ref errors, I could wrap my hyperlink function in the if error function. And I'm going to say, if this formula returns an error, instead of showing that error, return an empty text string. So in the value if error argument, I've specified an empty text string. Close the bracket there, press enter. And now if I copy this down, you can see that it hides the errors. But let's see if this works. Let's add another sheet. Let's say we add the southeast sheet. Let's see if our formula updates, and unfortunately it doesn't. So if you remember when we looked at some definitions of what the GET.WORKBOOK function does, type number 1, which is what we're using, does not update if a sheet is added or deleted. But there is a workaround, and that workaround is to use the T function with the now function. So let me explain what the T function does. So it has one argument, which is value, and if the value referred to is text, the text value is returned, otherwise an empty text string is returned. So here are some examples. These are the formulas I'm using in these cells. So if T refers to a text value, then it returns that text value, otherwise it returns an empty cell. Now down here, I'm using the now function to return the current date and time. Now this is a volatile function, so it does update automatically to show the current date and time whenever you refresh or edit your spreadsheet. Now if I include the now function in our sheet names formula, it will force that sheet names formula to automatically update. But obviously I don't want to display the time and date as part of our sheet names formula. So this is where the T function comes in, because we know that T returns an empty text string if it refers to anything other than a text value. So going back to our sheet names formula, so I'll go up to Name Manager here, I select sheet names, and what I'm going to do is concatenate the T function with the now function nested within it. I tick on green tick there to confirm, click on close. You can see it automatically picks up southeast. So let's add northeast. Move this over here. And let's see if it automatically picks it up. So now you can see I have northeast. Now Excel 365 users may be wondering whether they can apply hyperlinks to this spilled array of values, and it doesn't really work. So what you've got to do is create a hyperlink in a different column. So a hyperlink here, link location, so we use the same syntax as we've used before, referring to the spilled array of sheet names, and then we're going to specify the cell address. And the friendly name you're going to have to hard code in. So I'll just say jump to sheet. Now if you want all of these values to appear blue and underlined, then you select them all, select the blue format and underline them. Now the only thing here is that we are forced to include the table of contents sheet name in our table of contents, and we avoided that in our VBA solution. Now you could get around this where we have used the index function, and this will only work if your table of contents is in the first sheet of your workbook. So we're going to look at excluding table of contents using VBA, which is the first sheet in our workbook. So what you would do is change the row reference to A2, so it returns 2 in the first formula. So now if I copy that down, you can see it excludes the table of contents in our list. Okay, that's all I wanted to cover in this particular video. Hopefully that's useful. If it is, please subscribe, and I'll see you next video.